Judy Eadie Reber graduated from Towson State College with a bachelor's degree in elementary education in 1972. Mrs. Reber worked in public education as a teacher and administrator for 32 years. She came to Towson University in 2004 and currently serves as director of the MAT program. These are her reflections.
Mrs. Reber, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us your own personal history in terms of your preparation to become a teacher and your subsequent career in education. This will help us understand the evolution of teacher education at Towson across time a little bit better. And I guess a good place to begin would be in the beginning. So if you would share with us a little bit about your early social context, where you grew up, what kinds of thoughts you were having about what you wanted to be when you grew up, and as you started to approach college in high school, what were your thoughts?
Okay, well, I'm a product of Baltimore County. I grew up in the southeast area of Baltimore County in a community called Gray Manor, which is a suburb of Dundalk.
Okay.
And it's a working class neighborhood. Most of my friends and my parents and all worked at either Bethlehem Steel, Sparrows Point, or General Motors, or Martin Marietta. Like that. It was a good place to grow up. But also grew up in a community where college was not a priority among my friends. I had many friends that did go on to college, but just as many that looked forward to graduating from high school and going directly to a very well-paying job at Sparrows Point. So many folks that certainly had the capability and the talents to go on to college never went that direction because they were assured of a very good livelihood working at Sparrows Point. So that was a big factor in that the expectations in the neighborhood and among the peers were quite diverse. That I'm the first of my family to attend college. Both of my parents came to Maryland from Pennsylvania. And I guess back in the 50s when I was born, the expectations were that if you go to college, no, let me rephrase that. When I go to college, I would become either a teacher or a nurse. There was no other profession even under consideration. And nursing is definitely not in my blood. Okay. And luckily, my parents' expectations and my own desires kind of went hand in hand because I think I was born a teacher. Okay, I'm one of those folks that you hear about, you know, the little 3-year-old who lines up the teddy bears and teaches them in their classroom or at the kitchen table or whatever it was. And then went on to elementary school, and I used to coerce my buddies in the neighborhood to come over in the mornings in the summertime, and we would build a school with hanging blankets in the trees and so on. And of course, I got to be the teacher. And probably my greatest possession at that time was my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Robinson, gave me a teacher's guide to a math book. And I kept that thing and cherished that for years because that made me a real teacher. And from that time on, I have just been involved in teaching in a lot of different venues, you know, Sunday school, Future Teachers of America, and so on. And then when it came time to start looking at colleges, money was definitely an issue.
Sure.
And my first choice to go to college was the University of Maryland, or Frostburg, and then Towson. And because I would have had to have paid not only the tuition but also room and board at Frostburg and the University of Maryland, I made the decision to come to Towson where I could commute. So that's what brought me to Towson.
Great. So you got here and you were in the field of elementary or early childhood?
Elementary.
Elementary. And did you have a sense of the age group that you would want to work with?
I didn't going into it. But the experiences that I had at Towson through the observation and participation courses and then student teaching, helped me realize that I was not cut out to be a primary teacher. I had experiences in both 4th grade and 1st grade, and I felt very at home with the 4th grade. And 1st grade, I was really like, what am I doing here? This is not me.
So you come and you're a commuter. That's a little bit different from some of your fellow students who are living on campus and perhaps we're thinking or we're having a richer experience by virtue of the fact that they were on campus all the time. What do you remember about your experience at the university? And that can be anything from your regular, what we now call Gen Eds, of course that's going to change, that name's going to change, but, or more specifically about your education courses.
This is a difficult question for me to answer because I really have very little recall of my 4 years at Towson.
Interesting.
I think it was a product of what was going on, and Towson became a means to an end, and that end was becoming a teacher. But the means to get there was that I was living about 18, 20 miles away from the campus and commuting, getting here for 8 o'clock classes, and then running from when classes got over in the afternoon. I held 2 or 3 jobs throughout my entire 4 years at Towson, so it was running to one or the other of the jobs, and then going home and doing the homework, and then running back up here in the evening if I had to go to the library or anything. So it was a pretty hectic 4 years.
Yes.
And getting all the work done for the classes and so on, I did okay. I was here. I certainly wasn't Dean's List material, but I did okay. And I guess my greatest memories are in the history classes that I took.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I had Dr. Esslinger, who I believe is an assistant vice president here at the university now. I had him when he was in his first year as a history instructor.
Interesting.
And I also had a gentleman named Dr. Maroc for world civilization classes, and those were just 2 very dynamic teachers. And even though I'm not a history major or a history buff, they just pulled me right in.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're outstanding in their teaching style.
Well, then some role models.
Yeah.
In that at least. So, but not much about, do you have any recollection of when you actually had the opportunity to go into schools and at least observe?
Yeah, I think that I had a whole plethora of methods courses because they took not only like teaching reading and teaching math, but we were also required to take teaching music in the elementary school, teaching art, teaching phys ed, like that. And they were exciting classes, but I don't recall any observation and participation that went with those classes.
Interesting.
The first one that I recall was in the semester just prior to student teaching, when we went out 1 day a week to in a public school setting. And I went to Timber Grove Elementary in Reisterstown in a 4th grade class there. So that was my first experience that I recall just prior to student teaching, getting out into the public schools.
And that was 1 day a week? And what did you do? Did you just observe students, do you think?
No, I was in a 4th grade class, and it started out, observing what was going on and trying to take in the whole action that was going on in the classroom. And then it gradually evolved. My first lesson I ever taught occurred during that observation and participation phase. I remember it well to this day because it was a spelling lesson.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and that 20-minute spelling lesson took me about 2 to 3 hours to prepare.
Of course.
Like that. But that was my first opportunity to really teach a lesson and get in front of a group of a class and make them excited about, I don't know if it was long A, long E, whatever it happened to be at that time, but that was my first experience in the teaching.
That's great. Well, how'd you do? How'd you feel about that lesson?
About the spelling lesson? Oh, I think I was pretty excited about it because was so planned that I think I could have predicted just about every word that would have come out of my mouth at that time, like that. And things went well, and
Good.
it was good.
So this was not, you didn't go screaming from the room and say, what was I thinking?
No.
You sort of
No.
sounded like
No.
you felt that you were in the right place.
Yep, that was one 20-minute spelling lesson, yes.
So that takes us up to that semester where you're actually in schools and doing your student teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember where you were for those?
That's very
That's
easy to
the
remember.
first and
Yes.
the fourth.
I was assigned originally to Chapel Hill Elementary, which is now in the White Marsh area, but it was long before White Marsh ever existed, the big community. So. And a week before my student teaching was supposed to begin, I got a letter in the mail saying that Chapel Hill was too crowded. They didn't have enough mentors to accommodate the number of students that had been assigned there. And I had been reassigned to Gray Manor Elementary. And that's where I went to elementary school. It's right around the corner from where I lived.
Well, how did you feel about that?
That was a very unusual feeling when you go in, because you're now in a whole different role.
Yes.
And many of the teachers that I had there were still teaching there. So, you see them up you put them on their teaching pedestal, and all of a sudden you're looking at them more as, not peers exactly, but a little closer.
Yes.
Like that. And that was a real learning experience, but also something that you had to get over. Like
Yes.
that, on how to relate to them in a different way. And they, to a person, were very, very helpful, and kind of excited to see one of their own come back into the school. Yeah.
So were you there for both experiences?
Yes, and that's where I found out that I was not really designed to be a primary teacher. My experiences were in first grade and in fourth grade.
Right.
Yeah.
And what did you like about fourth that you didn't find in first?
I guess when I look at fourth grade, they are still young, still very excited about learning, still relatively easy to motivate, but they're beginning to have a mind of their own, and they're beginning to question, and they're beginning to look at things from different perspectives. So it's more of become more of a facilitator of learning and a guide, more so than, here's the facts that you're going to learn, or the word identification skills you're going to learn, or so on. So I think the interactions that are possible as you start working with older students are something that I really enjoy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that went well.
It did.
And you're at the end of your spring semester, or end of your student teaching. And how are you feeling about things?
Well, I think I kind of affirmed that, I knew I was supposed to be a teacher, and I was in the right place. I was excited because I saw teaching as an opportunity to approach things from a more of a creative perspective, like that. And when I began teaching, or in student teaching, things were not, I don't want to say looser, because you certainly had a curriculum to follow.
Yes.
But you had more latitude in how you approached that curriculum. So there was an opportunity for you to bring in your own creativity to the lesson, and bring out the creativity and critical thinking of the kids that you were teaching, like that. So that was good. So at the end of student teaching, I was ready to take on my own class.
And so you finished at the end of a fall semester? And had you applied to school systems? What happened? What's the next step?
During the fall semester, the recruiters from Personnel Department in Baltimore County Public Schools came to our school to interview us right there. And so I was interviewed by John Bailey. I still remember the man. And then you just waited. And that was a long spring. Because people didn't start getting contracts until probably March, April. And so I finished up the coursework here that I still had to do. All the time checking the mail every day.
And you must have gotten a letter at some point.
I did. Got a letter in April saying that I had been assigned to Grange Elementary. And Grange is in the community that is next door to Gray Manor. So I just went a half a mile in the other direction from my home. And I was assigned to Grange as a 4th grade teacher, room 16. I still remember it very clearly. And just could not wait to get over there and see my room. So I remember going in the day that I got my contract. School was already over. And I banged on the front door and just wanted to walk into school and see what it was. So the custodian was kind enough to let me in and show me around.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So, you go in there to see the kids start the semester, start the school year. And are you still excited when September comes?
I was very much an idealist and an optimist. Okay. And certainly exciting, and excited to be there, and just could not wait to try all these wonderful things that I had read about and learned about and so on. And then reality hits. And sometimes it's not quite as exciting as what you at first thought it might be. My first class that I taught had 5 reading groups.
Oh my heavens.
And they ranged from 2 little boys in one group who were considerably reading below grade level, up to a group of students of 8 to 10 students whose test scores indicated reading achievement at the high school level.
Wow.
Like that. So it was a whole range.
Yes.
So not only did I have the 5 reading groups to plan for every day, I also had 40 students in my classroom.
Did you really?
Yep, 28 boys and 12 girls. And so it was I would say that first year was a learning experience, every bit as much for them as it was for me. Yeah.
But that's a large class.
It was.
40 kids. My heavens. What were the highs? There must have been some highs in that first year experience.
I guess the highs would have to be looking at the students and working with them in a way that you knew they were moving forward, that they were learning, even though it was a heterogeneously grouped of students. You could look back and say, okay, I took John when he came in and we were working at this level, and at the end of the school year he had progressed far enough that he had made considerable progress. And this pretty much the same as from the students who were struggling to the students who were very, very talented. So that, I think, was probably what I was most proud of that year. Proud that I got some sleep at night.
Well, sure.
But not a whole lot of it.
Right. And that they had made progress and you had survived.
That's about it, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is probably not unusual for a first-year teacher.
Right.
Because every lesson plan is new.
Yes, and when you have high expectations for yourself, as well as high expectations for the kids, looking at a lesson plan that somebody else had written in a textbook was never quite good enough. So you had to put your own touch on it. And time management was a huge hurdle to get past.
That was going to be my next question to you. What did you think was the most difficult part of being a first-year teacher?
Oh, time management, without a doubt. When I was thinking about hurdles and what went on the first year, I'm surprised that classroom management didn't come first to my mind, because that was a huge class. But it didn't. We just seemed to work together well. I can't say they were all perfect days and everything was like a Leave It to Beaver kind of classroom, because that certainly wasn't it. But we just worked well together. The class and I clicked, and I think there are some classes that are just work like that with the teacher, some more so than maybe some other ones.
Well, that's a wonderful thing not to have to worry about is classroom management, because that usually does appear right at the top of the list.
Yeah, my time management issues were more so in how do I plan for these 5 reading groups and keep everybody excited about reading and interested and so on. And the same thing, because while you have the 5 reading classes, you also have all the other classes thrown in there, like that. So just trying to stay up with the lessons and making them child-centered and exciting for them was a big hurdle to get over.
Yes. And something you probably had to experience in order to sort of make modifications. You hadn't done this before.
Oh no, not at
So
all.
this was,
Yeah.
so
That-
brand
and-
new.
Right, and having 2 of those 5 reading groups with children with, probably now they would be receiving special education services,
I see.
but they did not
No.
at that time. So
Right.
knowing how to approach them and how to help them was a real learning experience for me.
So it's the end of your first year, and how are you feeling about it?
The end of the first year, tired, and still excited, because I don't think I've ever lost that idealism and optimism. That's, I think, just part of me. And so it's kind of like, all right, I know I made some mistakes. I know a lot of things that are not going to happen again, and that I won't repeat, and next year is going to be a better year. So
And was that true?
the smaller class to begin with.
Well,
So that was,
there you go. That helps
that was a help.
tremendously.
Yeah, that was back down to 20 some, I don't remember, but it's in the low 20s. And it was a good year. That year I had a group of students who were homogeneously grouped, and I had the below average readers. I'll put it as a whole class of below average readers. And while they were certainly not homogeneous in their needs, like that, it became an easier task of modifying lessons for a less broad spectrum of abilities and skills.
Sure.
Yeah.
That would make it easier. So how long did you stay at Grange? How long did you teach 4th grade?
I stayed at Grange Elementary for 3 years and taught 4th grade all 3 years. And then I received a full fellowship to graduate school up at the University of Connecticut. And I'd had an academic leave of absence for 1 year. And then I came back, and I came back certified in special education, and learned while I was at the University of Connecticut that while I was very interested in special ed, and that's probably as a result of the students that I had worked with,
I'm sure.
I was not cut out to be a full-time special educator. So I came back, and at that time, Baltimore County was organizing students at the junior high school level in something called B&L classes, behavior and learning classes, for students that had classroom management, discipline problems, emotional problems, but were still housed in the classroom setting. And I was interviewed, because I had that special ed certification now, for one of those positions. And I remember thinking, please don't let me get this position, because I knew it was not right for me. And the principal that I had worked with prior to going to graduate school, I don't know how he did it, but he brought me back to Grange.
Well, that was wonderful.
And I taught for 3 more years at Grange in grades 4, 5, and 6. Yeah.
But that was a professional eye-opener,
It was.
and we don't know until we try things. So you
So.
kind of knew that that was not for you.
No, but what did happen up at the University of Connecticut is I went through the program, became a certified special education teacher, but the program had some electives to it. And I took 3 of the electives I took were in the field of gifted and talented education. And there's a professor there named Dr. Joe Renzulli, who is nationally renowned as in the field of gifted and talented education. And he was probably the most exciting and inspiring teacher I have ever had. And that brought me very interested into the field of gifted and talented.
So when you went back to Grange, did you have any opportunity to explore that further, or were you primarily in an elementary classroom setting?
I had some opportunity when I taught 6th grade my last year, and the students were regrouped for math. And there happened to be a group of students in 6th grade at that time who on their I don't know, it was the Iowa Test of Basic Skills or one of the achievement tests that were given. They had all scored at the 95th percentile or above.
I see.
So they were quite talented in math. And the principal made the decision that all of those students would come to me, and I became their math teacher in sixth grade math. So I worked with a very, very talented group of students that year, and totally enjoyed it. But one aside from that is within this group of talented sixth graders, had one child in there. His name was Nick, and he was a first grader, and put all the other students to shame in his math ability.
Oh my heavens!
So that was a really unique teaching experience, working with this first grader who was very gifted in mathematics.
Judy, do you know what happened to him? Did we ever hear anything further about Nick?
Nope. In fact, I've even looked on the different websites, Googled his name, and this so I can't find it. Cannot find it. I've always wondered.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at some point, you become even more involved in gifted and talented programming by taking a position, I think, in the county, specifically for gifted and talented programs. And when does that happen?
When I was in my third year after graduate school, I was still at Grange teaching sixth grade that year. Baltimore County advertised for the position of elementary gifted and talented resource teacher. It was the first time that this position had ever been offered. Nobody had held it before. It was a brand new position. And there were 4 people to be hired for this. And so I contacted Dr. Don Merriman, who was the coordinator of elementary education at that time, and asked to be interviewed for this position. And I was interviewed, and I was one of the first 4 GT teachers.
Wow, wonderful.
Baltimore County. So
yes, that must have been gratifying.
it was exciting time, exciting and scary.
Tell us a little bit more about that position. How long were you in it?
I was in the position for 6 years. And just to, I guess, give you an example of the way it worked, is when the 4 of us who were originally hired for that position, we had not met before, we didn't know each other, and we reported to Stoneleigh Elementary on the first day of school when teachers are back, and we walked in, were directed to this empty classroom, and we walked into the classroom, and in the classroom were 4 desks, 4 chairs, 4 letter openers, and 4 pens. And that was the start of the elementary gifted and talented program.
Oh my heavens.
We had no supervision. We were not under any particular umbrella at the time. We were just given the task to start the elementary GT program. So you from starting from absolutely nothing when we first began it, to working very hard with what ended up being a very talented group of good teamwork over the 6 years. It grew to be a respected program in the county.
How nice.
Yeah, it was good.
And what kinds of things did you do? First of all, I guess you had to get to know each other.
Yes.
Did you said you didn't know each other before you started, but everybody was a teacher in the county?
Yes.
Coming into that position?
Yes, everybody had elementary experience. I think most everybody was a classroom teacher, except one lady was a reading specialist. Like that. So, and we came from all 4 different sections of the county were represented. And we had to learn each other and learn each other's styles and try to figure out what our role was, what our responsibilities were, because nothing existed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, that first year was a tremendous year of, learning the lessons the hard way. We made a lot of mistakes. None of us were familiar with the way Baltimore County worked. So,
I see.
Yeah. So we made some mistakes and learned from the mistakes. And by the end of that first year, Dr. Mary Ellen Satterley, who was the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction, I believe it was, assigned our team to the elementary office So we became part of the Office of Elementary Education in Baltimore County. But it was a sort of wild 8 or 9 months when you had 4 classroom teachers who had never worked at the county level like that, trying to take this program and make something from it.
Well, I think maybe that was what the intent was, just fresh minds.
Could be.
Without the burden of how Baltimore County Public Schools operated as any kind of deterrent or obstacle.
Could be. We got ourselves into some trouble, but it wasn't anything that couldn't be fixed.
And what was their expectation for you to accomplish by the end of the year? I mean, were you designing curriculum? Were you putting together some kind of evaluation system for who gets to be identified as GT, or were you working with kids directly?
Yes, to all of those. Yep, I think our first, after we got past the organizational woes, like that. And,
of course.
Yeah. Then we had to define our role and what the responsibilities were. Like that. And that was directly related to, well, what kids are we talking about? Who exactly are the gifted and talented in elementary? Because an identification criteria had never been established. And that was one of the first responsibilities that I had, is designing the identification criteria for the GT kids in elementary school. And then after you've identified these students, well, it's kind of like a so what situation. So now you've got this group of students, what are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
Because by the nature of the program, you're saying that the traditional program is not fulfilling their needs, so what are you going to do to make it better for them? And then that led into curriculum writing, curriculum adaptations, something like that. So we did a lot of administrative work as far as designing the criteria for who are the gifted and talented, and then designing curriculum in math and reading primarily for those kids. And then the job also entailed providing professional development to every elementary school on who are the gifted and talented and how do you work with these kids that are in your classroom. And then it also evolved so that in addition to the professional development, we would go around and teach at the students who had been identified as gifted at the different schools all around the county. And in most schools, we taught small groups who would see the kids once or twice a week for like 8-week sessions, for like a mini course we taught, which we also had to write. And so we got to all the schools in Baltimore County with that.
And how many elementary schools are we talking about?
I'm thinking somewhere around 120 there were at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot.
And you were somehow, so that's, even with 4 people, that's 30 schools per person.
And some schools we were able to work with the Department of Transportation and cluster them together. So schools that had a very low population of students that met the criteria, we would pull them together maybe from 3 schools and meet at one of the schools for extended time. So that helped with the logistics.
I was going to say, you could use all the help you could get.
Yes.
Because that was an enormous task.
Yeah. One of the things that I most enjoyed, well, in addition to the curriculum writing, that has been a pleasure of mine all the way through. But we were always on the lookout for opportunities where kids would be able to be involved in enrichment activities like that. And one day I remember I got just a advertisement in the mail about a program called the Olympics of the Mind that was being held in Ohio, it was. And it sounded interesting, so I decided to go out there in the summer and see what it was all about. It was a very exciting, creative problem-solving program. So I brought it back, talked with the elementary office, and got the go-ahead to bring it to Baltimore County. And then for the next 13, 14 years, I worked as coordinator and in other capacities in getting that program going. So that was exciting.
That is.
I don't know if you're familiar with that program or not.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Oh my. It's a creative,
well, in broad strokes,
yes.
I mean.
It's a creative problem-solving program where students work in teams of 7. And they select the Olympics of the Mind. They were then required to change their name to Odyssey of the Mind. There were some copyright infringement problems there. But they would create long-term problems, and the students as a team would decide which one of these long-term problems they would attack, okay, and solve. And so there was no right answer. It was up to interpretation and so on. So they would work and create a solution to this problem. Some of them might involve theatrical productions, some technical engineering type of things, a variety of different kinds of problems, and they would choose one. And most of the students had an advisor or two that were teachers at the school buildings and would work after school on these problems for months. And then they would come together in a regional competition and compete against other students their age who had selected the same problem. And then we had teams of judges that would assess according to a pretty clear expectations there, and then they would decide the top 3 teams for that particular one, and then they would go on to a state competition, and then the same thing happened, and from the state, then you would go to the international competition.
Wow.
So I had an opportunity to work with the students, to organize the competitions, and also to judge at the international competitions. That was exciting times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I guess other counties in the state were doing this as well then?
Yes, yes. It was a very large program for many years. Yeah.
And how did we do?
We being
Baltimore County and the state of Maryland.
Baltimore County had a number of state winners, and a couple of the teams went on to become international winners.
Really?
Yes. The team from Kingsville Elementary, under the coach Amy DeNike, was there, took her team to the international competition several times and won several times.
Wow.
So it was exciting, and it was just the excitement came from seeing the students working together as a team, believing that they had worked well and had come up with a solution, seeing the parents there cheering them on, seeing the siblings there. It was just an exciting time and provided a lot of different kind of learning activities for the students. Yeah, it was good.
So at some point you consider going into administration, other than in addition to a program like this. What led you in that direction?
Well, administration was not a position that I actively pursued. Okay, I know there's some folks that go into teaching and say, I want to be a principal or whatever, but that was not me. At one point in my life, I was asked to consider a position as an elementary supervisor, working in the Office of Elementary Ed.
Yes.
And I was expecting my son at the time. And I knew that the supervisory position required an awful lot of travel.
Yes.
And a very irregular schedule. And I thought with a newborn, I needed to know where I was going every day and have some type of continuity in my life.
Of course.
Would be best for him. So I declined that opportunity. And I was just continuing with the GT position.
Absolutely.
And a number of folks that I had the greatest respect for in Baltimore County suggested that I take their leadership program, which was called the Phases at the time. And it was phase 1, 2, and 3. And so I did, and then 2 years later, I was assigned as assistant principal at a school.
And you were ready for that then?
I was ready for a change. I seemed to work in like 6-year cycles. And I had been with the Gifted and Talented program for 6 years then, and I was ready for something different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you became an assistant principal where?
At Bear Creek Elementary. Again, down in the Gray Manor area, Gray Manor, Bear Creek area of Baltimore County. And I worked with the principal with whom I had worked at Grange. I was his assistant principal. And the school, Bear Creek, had been open for 30-some years, maybe 34 years, and I was the second assistant principal ever to be assigned there.
Oh my heavens.
So that was a very interesting position. I followed somebody who had been there since the school opened.
Wow.
And 30-some years.
Wow. Difficult to do. I mean,
interesting. Yes.
I mean, that's a hard transition for a school.
Yeah. Yeah.
To lose somebody who's been in that job for seemingly forever.
Okay. Well, when I first took the job, I didn't think it was going to last very long.
Oh,
Because my first summer, I got myself into some serious difficulties.
oops.
Yeah. When you're a new assistant principal, I think the principal's not quite sure sometimes how to get you started in the job.
Uh-huh.
So the principal sent me down to the book room and told me to take a look at the books and get rid of anything that was old and not being used anymore. Well, the book room was absolutely filled with books that had copyright dates from the 1950s in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the science book and it would say, maybe one day we will send a man to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So you were looking at things that were very, very old. And so I made my stacks of books and I went and asked the principal, what do I do with these?
Yes.
I didn't know what to do with them. And he said, put them in the dumpster because they're antiquated. They're wrong information. They're not going to be good for anybody. So I did. And that was on a Friday. And I came into work on a Monday and had a telephone call from the area superintendent plus the area councilman asking why we were destroying school property and
Oh,
wasting
no.
taxpayers' money. So I thought my career as a assistant principal was going to come to a very quick halt.
Uh-huh. But it didn't.
Nope, it didn't. We
And
got over it.
I was going to say, and somehow that got resolved.
Yes.
Did you get new books?
Yes. There were plenty of new books in there, but it was just a compilation of
I see.
nothing ever
Was thrown out.
thrown out.
And,
Yeah.
and now you knew why.
Yes.
At what cost you threw things out.
Yeah.
My heavens. So, we're assistant principal in a couple of different places.
I was the assistant principal at Bear Creek for 6 years again. And then I moved to assistant principal at Hawthorne Elementary. And I was assistant principal there for 5 years. And they transferred the principal to a school in January on the other side of town. And I was acting principal there for the remainder of that school year after he left, and then became the principal at Hawthorne for 4 years.
And you had done these courses, excuse me, this program to be qualified to become a principal?
The phases.
And is that sort of in service in a manner of speaking? I mean, that's not affiliated with a higher ed institution or anything.
No, it was Baltimore County's
I see.
System for moving forward in the county, and moving into an administrative position.
So,
So that's training on the job.
yes, yeah. And so you were, as you said, for 4 years at Hawthorne?
3.5.
3.5. And what did you want to accomplish as a principal going into that position, especially mid-year?
That was a difficult transition, mid-year.
Yes.
Like that, because when people know you as the assistant principal, then you change position and your responsibilities change, and people relate to you in a different way
Yes.
than what they had. So
Yes.
that was not the easiest of transitions. One of the things that I was primarily concerned about going into the position is that we had a terrific number of students who were tested in reading at the end of second grade to see what their reading achievement levels were. And we had close to, it was a very large percentage, 80 to 85% of our students were reading, according to this test scores, at 2 or more years below grade level.
Good grief.
And I'm not so naive to think everybody's going to be on grade level or above, but that was entirely too many. And it made me take a very serious look and say, what is going on with our reading program here?
Yes.
And a group of teachers and I spent many hours together trying to figure out what is going on. And make a long story short, what we hypothesized is that Hawthorne was a school with a great number of new teachers. It was not uncommon to have 17 to 20 non-tenured teachers at a time in this school. It's it was a challenging school.
Yes.
And at that time, the reading program that was being advocated was the whole language program. And I don't think anybody had any particular trouble with the philosophy of whole language and what it was all about. But asking a new teacher who had very limited knowledge of reading instruction to implement this program created some problems. And so we said, all right, what can we do for our students and for our teachers
Yes.
that will bring some structure to the reading program and fill in some gaps that we knew through diagnostic analysis were pretty common across the grade levels and with the students. So we took a risk. And so one of the things that we knew was missing was any type of structured approach to word identification skills. And at that time, we looked around and said, okay, what can we do? And we looked at workbooks, the good old phonics workbooks, and they were better than nothing, but they didn't do the trick. And so we came in contact with the folks at Johns Hopkins University who were working with the Success for All program. And we worked very closely with them and brought that reading program for the beginning readers into the school and saw our test scores turn around.
Great.
We were very lucky to have diagnosed it correctly and helped the students with that. So that was probably utmost on my mind.
And a wonderful accomplishment.
Didn't happen quickly, but yeah, we got there.
Right. But in partnership with your faculty,
Absolutely, yes.
you know, with them buying into this.
And then we became a model school for that program, and many, many schools from Baltimore County came to visit the reading program because we learned that we were not alone with this concern. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's good to see the students become readers like that. So that was due to the good work of an awful lot of people.
Yeah. But in part to the very good work of a principal who said, what's wrong? Let's diagnose it and let's fix it.
So,
And just said, we're going to do it.
yes. Yep,
I
we
mean,
set our
this-
mind, set a goal, and we
And
just
you
did-
got there.
Just got there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, at some point, somebody gives you a phone call from Towson University and talks to you about possibly doing some work here.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was Karen Schaefer. And that's who was the director of the Center of Professional Practices. And Karen had been my supervisor in the Southeast area. So I've known Karen for a long time.
Yes.
And I was, that time, principal at Sussex Elementary. And had accomplished what I wanted to accomplish at that school. Sussex was the first school in Baltimore County that had to offer alternative school placements to students because of declining achievement scores.
I see.
It was one of the sanctions from the State Department. And when I first went there, I learned within a couple of weeks of being there that this terrible cloud was over this school. And we had to offer students that opportunity to go to a more effective school.
I see.
And so,
Whoa.
yes, yeah. So we worked together over the years there and turned the achievement around through another lot of hard work from a lot of people and dedication, and got the school going on an upward trend in achievement. And it was like, take a deep breath, okay, we're on the right way. And then I started thinking, all right, I'm eligible to retire. Is this the end of it? End of the road? And that's when I got a call from Karen.
I see. But, well, I think this was going to be your future. You were just far too successful. You know, if you
Well,
have a school with issues, call
not
Judy
me.
Reber.
No, it's not to call me. It's just let's get everybody going and a shared responsibility
Yes.
for making change.
And you were doing this successfully with 2 schools, so I'm sure that was part of the county's thinking.
Well, I don't know. I was just very pleased with our work together and
Yes,
the changes that
wonderful.
happened in the school.
So Karen gave you a call,
She did.
And she said, in essence,
she said, "Are you retiring?" And at that point I said, "I don't know. What are you thinking
Yeah.
about?" And she said that there was an opening in the MAT program for an elementary supervisor. And would I be interested? So I came on campus and met with the director, Debbie Piper, at the time, and thought that the course sounded interesting. The opportunity would be keeping me in the field that I really loved. I loved professional development and working with teachers on that. So I retired from Baltimore County and came to work at Towson.
And what did you first do in that role when Debbie was the director?
I was hired as a lecturer, and in that I supervised student teachers, interns, we're not student teachers anymore, interns in their PDS schools during their professional year, which is the fall and the spring semester in the MAT program. So I supervised them in the classrooms, and I also taught seminar classes both semesters.
And so you got to know the Masters in the Art of Teaching program very quickly.
Yes.
Because you were instantly immersed in it.
Yeah, I got to know the field part of it and the course part of it. Spent a lot of time trying to make that 797 course that's in the fall very meaningful to students to help move them forward. But yeah, I got to know the part of MAT that happened out in the schools.
And what was in that fall, that 797 course? What were your goals with that course? You said you sort of wanted to make it more meaningful.
I needed to bring to, not me, but I thought the course needed to bring into play an understanding for the students of what makes for effective instruction. What are the components of effective teaching? And put it in a way that it makes sense. And put it in a way that they're establishing like the habits of the mind, that when I go to plan a lesson, these are the things that I need to keep in mind, and it begins with the students. Okay, and then how after that knowledge is known, how do I take that and take a look at the curriculum and the standards and so on, and make it work and assess and all the other good things that are part of instruction. So we wanted to bring some structure to the 797 so that instead of being a series of discrete topics like writing an objective, multiple intelligences, assessment, instead of just hitting and missing everything, that there was continuity to it.
I see.
And so things would fit into a context that they would then be able to take with them for their entire teaching career.
And that course, that's in the 1 year and a summer program for full-time MAT students?
It's for everybody.
It's for everybody. And are they in schools while they're taking that?
They are. So the things that you talk about in seminar are put into practice when they're in their schools. They're, depending on the program they're in schools either 1 or 2 days a week. Our professional year only runs fall to spring. So this is fall semester.
So they need to get into schools early.
Right, they're in there when teachers come back.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is also a wonderful advantage.
Absolutely. We tell them it's the first time they will ever have the opportunity to watch what goes on in the opening of the school, but not be held responsible for it when the kids walk in. So, yeah, it's a good learning experience.
Absolutely, an important piece, which I think we started doing with our other programs as well.
I think
initial
so too.
certs.
Yeah.
Which just amazes me that we didn't always do that. It just seems so obvious.
And the students are always so amazed at what goes into preparing a classroom for opening day. So now they've had a chance to experience it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so were you also involved in supervising the interns, supervising student teachers in the spring semester?
Yes, yes. I taught the 798 seminar and supervised their full-time internships.
I see.
Yeah.
And this was for elementary?
And early childhood.
Oh, and early childhood. So what kinds of experiences are they having once they move into that student teaching semester? Do they now have 2 experiences at different grade levels, or?
You're asking a good question, because the MAT program is the pathway to initial certification for early childhood, elementary, all of the secondaries, and special education.
Oh, my heavens.
Okay, so every one of those programs has a slightly different twist on it.
I see.
So if I speak to elementary or in early childhood, yes, they're in two different placements.
I see. And that brings us, I suppose, to another point that ought to be made and leads us to a further discussion of MAT, which is that Debbie takes a position in Baltimore County, and the program is in need of a new director. And somebody says, Judy, you're the obvious choice. Yeah. And that happened after you had been teaching in the program for how long?
It was my 4th year, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you just couldn't say no.
Let's just say Debbie was pretty persuasive, and that her departure from Towson, I think, was not expected. And when she accepted the new position, there was very little turnaround time to go and recruit somebody.
Yes.
And it was in December when this all happened. And so they asked if I would be willing to do the responsibilities of director. And I thought they were asking me to do it until the end of the school year, like in May, the end of the semester, because I tended to say, well, okay, I can do this for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's 5 years ago. So.
Which, yes, but you always do things so well.
Well, I have very good feelings about MAT. It's a challenging program, and we have very high expectations for our students, but our students are, for the most part, totally dedicated to becoming the best teachers that they can. Our students are ones who make a deliberate choice to come back to school and get certified as a teacher. It's not like I'm in undergraduate school, what will I do? Oh, maybe I'll try teaching. These folks have all experienced life outside of the college, for the most part, not everybody. And they are deliberate in wanting to become a teacher, and will put forth the effort and the time and all the other good things that are required to reach that goal.
So, well, you've already told us the breadth of programs that MAT involves now. Could you tell us a little bit? I'm intrigued by the nature of the students. So what kinds of backgrounds, when you say they've been out there in the world doing something else, and now they have decided at some point to become teachers, what kinds of backgrounds do they come with?
They come with a great variety of backgrounds. Over the years, I tend to look for trends and things that are happening.
Sure.
And one group of students that seems to be the growing group right now are those that have just finished their undergraduate degrees in some field and look to the MAT as like a 5th year to get their teaching certification. So we have a growing number of students that are coming to MAT for that purpose. Maybe they were an undergraduate English major or a social studies major, like that. And so they've decided that they want to teach but haven't gone the secondary education route as an undergraduate student and come to MAT and take our program to get their initial certification. That's one group of students. Another group of students are those that have been out in the real world for, I guess I'll say 5 to 8 years, and have become disenchanted with what they were doing. Okay, and these are my favorite students. I shouldn't say that, but these are a lot of times my favorite students, because they'll come to me and they'll say, you know, I always wanted to be a teacher, but so-and-so said, don't go into teaching, it doesn't pay enough, or something like that. So they followed some other career path, and it's never been the right thing for them. So they decided to come back and do what they've always wanted to do. So that's an exciting group to work with also.
That is.
That is.
And that's a major commitment. I mean, these are people who are going to give up whatever they're doing and the salary associated with it to spend a bunch of money for a year to become a teacher.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason that we have such great students, because this is a deliberate decision on their parts. And it's got a lot of ramifications for those who have families and or even if you're self-supporting. So they've made a commitment and they want to do well. So third group of students that we have in MAT are ones that are actual career changers or possibly retiring people who want to come back and teach. We have had people who are engineers, lawyers. We've had a number of lawyers. Just about every branch of the federal government that you can think of have come, and they've just said, I want to change. And so they've come to teaching. And that's the other group would be the folks, the women mainly, who graduated from college, got married, had their children, have brought their children through elementary school, and they're now into middle school or high school, have been PTA mothers, substitute teachers, all have found that they really like the school setting and they want to become teachers. So that's kind of like an overview of that. We have many people from many, many different backgrounds coming into the program.
Wow. Without going through all the curriculum for the program, what do you think makes MAT so successful? What are the sort of, shall I say, the essential elements?
I don't know if I can pin it down to a particular element. I think, to go back to what I've just said, I think it's the dedication and commitment on the part of the students. That is a big part of it, a very big part of it. I think the folks who have been involved with the MAT programs have set very high expectations for our students, whether it's in the coursework or whether it's in the field experiences. Communicate these expectations very clearly to the students, but then also work very hard with the students to help them reach the expectations. And I think it's that commitment from everybody, the teamwork that I see from whether it's those of us who work in the administrative end of MAT here at the College of Ed, the instructors that come from every department in the College of Education. We have instructors that represent the Department of Elementary Ed, Early Childhood, Instructional Technology. I know I'm leaving off somebody, but
special ed.
Of course, special ed. We have instructors from all of those departments teaching our MAT students. And then we have an outstanding group of supervisors that can help them make that transition from being a student to a teacher, which is no easy task.
And I would think many of those folks have made that transition themselves because they've been in schools initially as teachers, so they know that the difficulty of that transition.
And so I think the people, and then you have to look at it as a whole MAT team with lots of members and each bringing their own strength to it, but all pursuing a common goal. So it's one of the reasons that I think we've been successful. And there's more detailed things that we work with, trying to bringing continuity to the coursework. One of the things that we've worked very hard in lately is bringing an understanding of working with diverse populations.
Yes. And
so we have worked it from the beginning course in EDUC 730, which is like an introductory course to teaching. And the students get introduced to the students that they will meet in the classroom and all the different characteristics and diversity and all that they will bring. And then they move on to EDUC 731, which is curriculum and assessment. And they start saying, well, these students are in the classroom, what do I do about it? So they have a more theoretical framework of, I have a child who is an English language learner, what are some of the strategies that I can incorporate into my teaching that will help the student be a successful learner? And I'm working in a class, or excuse me, a school that has a very high Title I or free and reduced lunch population. What are some of the implications of these students coming from a more impoverished background that are going to impact me with my teaching? So all that rolls into it at a theoretical practice in 731, the curriculum and assessment. Then they moved on to 797, where they take that theoretical practice and now they're in a classroom and they have to make it work. So bringing that continuity has been a couple years' work. But we're getting good results. So
Yes.
that's
Well, that
good.
was another question I was going to ask. Your students exit the program with a master's degree.
Correct.
So that would suggest that any school system that wants to hire them is going to have to pay a little bit more for them than they would for somebody coming out of an undergraduate initial certification program.
With the current salary rate or salary scales that are in place now,
Yes.
that's correct.
But
that-
that's changing.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be changing.
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't seem to be an obstacle or work to the detriment of the MAT students. We have a pretty successful hire rate of approximately 90% of our students
Wow.
getting jobs each year.
Which says something about the program.
Well, it says something about a lot of things, yes.
But it does say that school systems say they are, to be as sort of crass as you can be about it, they're worth the money.
Yeah, we hope so.
Yes, well, apparently we know so,
So.
with that kind of success rate in terms of placement.
So, yeah,
So this program works well.
it has, yes. Yep. Right now, we're under a period of slightly declining enrollment. And I think that's directly affected by the information that's out there that teaching jobs are very hard to come by. Like that, and that's been in place for a number of years now. So, and I think it affects the people who make that deliberate decision to put all that money into a program. They want to know that there's a possibility of a job out
Yes,
there.
a good possibility.
A good possibility, yeah. So right now we're under a slight decline in enrollment, but I think when the retirement starts kicking in, that all these school systems are predicting is going to happen, I think we're going to be able to come back up.
Well, and there's been a suggestion that retirement rush has been delayed by the economy.
Right.
And now that the economy is getting better, that also might work against MAT students
It could.
coming in because they're finding something else
Right.
outside of teaching.
Right.
So we've got a lot of things that
We
are
juggle
that
a lot of different things there.
exactly that are affecting enrollments.
Yeah.
So
But we're very proud of the students that are out there representing the MAT,
well,
and they are all over the place.
and they are very proud of being graduates of the program too, and that's apparent from talking with them.
That's good to hear.
It
Yes.
is true. Judy, what have we forgotten? What kinds of things? I'm looking at the list of questions, and I'm thinking, other than that last question that we always save to the end, is there anything about your own career, your involvement here at Towson, or anything that I haven't asked that you would regret or not talking about?
I can't think of anything specific. You've been pretty comprehensive here. I guess just thinking, and if the audience is someone who is new to the field of teaching, I think one of the things that you've got to just keep in your mind all the time, that is, it's okay to be a risk taker. Because in my professional career, the best things have come about by taking a risk. Whether it's personal things or whether it has to do with helping students be successful. So you don't
That's a
always have
good
to
piece of advice.
You don't always have to follow the status quo.
Well, then let me ask you that last question, which is simply, given your long professional career in education, what wisdom would you share, advice would you give to individuals who are considering a teaching career?
I guess the first one is you need to always keep in mind that teaching's a way of life. I know other people have probably said this, but it is a way of life. It impacts everything you do. You're not going to be able to leave school at the end of the day or leave school at the end of June and tuck it away for 2 or 3 months and then come back, because it's part of your life, whether you're walking down a grocery aisle and doing your shopping, whether you're going on vacation, whether you're reading a book, watching a television show. This teaching pace is always part of your life, and there's no getting away from it. And that's okay. But you have to realize that it's not a job that you can separate. It is just part of your life, like that. So just know that going into it, and also know that you need to be prepared for quite a range of emotions when you're in the teaching profession. You've got to be excited about the highs that come along when you've been working with a group of students and they've been struggling and they finally get it, and the highs, but then the desperation that comes could be the next day when you think, why on earth did I choose this profession? And I think you always have to believe that in the end that you have the power to make a difference in the lives of the students. And you keep that belief in your mind, and then you're going to be a successful teacher. So.
Good wisdom. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
This has been wonderful.